Chapter 2, Section 6 is about geometric proofs. In this lesson, we're actually not going to do any geometric proofs, just build ourselves up for it tomorrow during class. So not by the end of this lesson, but by the end of tomorrow, Monday, and Tuesday, you should be able to write 2-column proofs, and you should be able to prove geometric theorems by using deductive reasoning. So remember that a proof is an argument that uses logic, definitions, properties, and previously proven statements to show that a conclusion is true. So remember back to our conditional statements, we had our hypothesis, and that was written as an if-then statement. So we had if, blah, 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 then blah, blah, blah. The whole point of a proof is to show why, if one thing happens, then the other one does. So this is where we're going to pull in definitions, some postulates we know, any properties we know, and any theorems we have. So in a diagram, a lot of these problems you're either going to be given a diagram or you can make a diagram. But you need to be able to correctly read it. You must know what you can and cannot assume based on what you see in it. So you can assume collinear points, betweenness of points, like this point is between these other 2 points, coplanar points, straight angles and lines, adjacent angles, linear pairs, and vertical angles. You cannot assume a measure of a segment or a measure of an angle. So even if you have something like this with A and B, and then you have something like this with C and D, and they kind of look alike, if they don't have the little slashy here to tell you that they're congruent, you cannot assume they are congruent. Measures of angles. So let's say you have an angle that looks like this. You cannot assume that's 90 degrees unless it tells you there's 90 degrees there. Congruent segments, congruent angles, right angles is huge. So if a diagram includes labeled information, such as an angle measure or a right angle mark like this, then you can treat that information like you were given it. So if you have something like this and it tells you it's 30 degrees, you know that's 30 degrees. So here's a picture. What can we assume? Well, there's lots we can assume. We have these 3 points right here that are all in a straight line. So we can say A, B, and C are collinear. We could also say that angle ABC is a straight angle. If we go back to what we can assume, we did collinear points. Betweenness of points. We can say without a doubt that B is between A and C. Coplanar points, we can say that A, B, C, and D are coplanar. They're all on the same plane. Straight angles and lines, we already just said that. We said they're collinear, that it's a straight angle. We could have line AB or line AC or BC. We know those are a line. Adjacent angles, we got some of those, so we could say that angle ABD is adjacent to angle DBC. Linear pairs of angles, we could say that those two are not only adjacent, we could say and a linear pair, because we know they form a straight line. Vertical angles, we don't have any, so we can't say that. And then what we can't assume, measures of segments. So even though from A to B kind of looks like it might be bigger than B to C, we cannot assume the lengths of AB, BC, or BD. We cannot assume measures of angles, so we cannot assume angle measures of ABD or DBC. We cannot say anything about congruent segments, congruent angles, or right angles. So we can't say anything is or is not congruent. So half the battle is figuring out what you can say and what you can't say based on a diagram that they give us. So theorems, you've heard that word before, but a theorem is just a statement that can be proven. Here is 4 theorems that we're going to talk about in this chapter that we're going to use to help prove some things. So we have a linear pair theorem. If 2 angles form a linear pair, then they're supplementary. So because we know that a linear pair makes a line, and a line is 180, it must be supplementary. Congruent supplements theorem. If 2 angles are supplementary, which remember means they add to 180, and they're the same angle, then the 2 angles have to be congruent. They both have to be 90. The right angle congruence theorem says all right angles are exactly the same. They're all congruent. And the congruent complements theorem is kind of like the congruent supplements theorem, except both of them would be 45 degrees. So we will talk about these and we will actually prove them, because it's something that can be proven, over the course of the next couple days. So this process is what should be going through your head every time I ask you to prove something, not only in this section, but for the rest of this year in geometry. Write the conjecture to be proven. So what am I trying to prove? What's my conclusion? Draw a diagram. If there's not one there, it always helps to draw a picture. State the given information and mark it on your diagram. So you're always going to be given something. Remember those problems we did with the weird M's, the I's, and the U's? I gave you a piece of information, and then you had to do some steps to get to the conclusion. State the conclusion of the conjecture in terms of the diagram, and then plan your argument. So tomorrow we're going to spend most of our time talking about planning our argument and what our argument should look like. And this is the goal of the lesson for Friday, Monday, and Tuesday, is to write something called a 2-column proof. So a 2-column proof has 2 columns. The first column is all of your statements, like this is what I know. Your other column gives your reasons or why you're doing something. And again, we did this with the M's, the I's, and the U's. You gave a statement, and then you had to tell me why you could do what you do, and you use either Rule 1, Rule 2, or Rule 3. So this is one of those proofs that we said we were going to do, the right angle congruence theorem, and we'll eventually be able to come up with the statements and the reasons all on our own. Since it's a huge, long process, we were going to do it step by step, and that's why we're taking 3 days to do it. So the goal of these notes is to make sure that you know what the word theorem means and what we can assume when we're given a diagram or when you make your own diagram. So make sure you write down any questions you have and we can go over them tomorrow. Have a good night.